Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today, kind of funny and kind of sad at the same time. Let's do it. Police officers of Reddit. What was your "they would have gotten away with it if they just kept their mouth shut" story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I had a car pass me once. Passenger hangs the upper half of his body out of the passenger side window with his middle finger in the air while screaming, "F the police." He had my attention for the seatbelt violation. I got behind the car and ran the registration. Registration is suspended. Registered owner's driver's license is attached to the registration, and his license is suspended. Registered owner also has 2 warrants for retail theft. I stopped the car, and they both started with the free speech thing and how I can't stop them for giving me the finger or swearing, which is 100% correct. When I pointed out that I can, however, stop them for the passenger not wearing a seatbelt and for the registration violation, suddenly they got quiet. Driver got arrested for a suspended license and his warrants, and the passenger got himself a citation. The driver's vehicle got impounded. Moral of the story? Tell your passengers to shut their mouths. Had that guy not been a moron, his buddy would have been homeward bound. Not a cop, but a public defender. Had a client who made a long statement that didn't help her case, but the judge was letting her go without setting bail. Before leaving the courtroom, however, I was informed that the police from another precinct were coming to pick her up, and she'd be held until they did. They didn't get her until much later, but I told her to absolutely not say anything to them, to keep her mouth shut. The next day, I go to see her arraignment, and I get the notice of any statements, which started with, "My lawyer told me not to say anything, but this is what happened," admitted to a variety of crimes. It was frustrating to say the least. Not a police officer, but I do know of this house in my local village that was a notorious drug den. The police came to search the place, but couldn't find anything. As they were leaving, the lovely owner yelled at them that they should have brought the drug dogs. So yeah, they came back a few days later with the drug-sniffing dogs and found huge amounts of drugs hidden away. I was asked to help keep peace while 2 probation officers searched the guy's house. Before everyone gets upset, in most jurisdictions, you have to submit to a search of your person and your home if you're on probation. During the search, a PO lifted the probation's mattress and monotonously said, "Wow." The probationer got upset and said, "Yeah, it's effing meth and a gun. Arrest me. I don't give an F." Turns out the PO found a huge dildo, but after the guy opened his mouth, the PO lifted the mattress more and found a bunch of individually wrapped grams of meth and a Glock 17. The PO said that seeing the dildo was enough for him to ignore the mattress, but because the guy said something, he kept looking. That guy's attitude and his need to open his mouth got him 10 years in prison.
Sometimes that guilty conscience just gets the better of you. I mean, what could have been just, something that everybody has under their bed turns out to be jail.
Currently watching Live PD, and the guy told the officer, "I have caffeine pills in my back pocket." Gets them out and puts them on the hood. Everyone's chill. Dude then comes clean and says, "It's Molly." And the officers look at each other and go, "Do we even have a test kit for that?" Other officer says, "No." Dude's face just shows he should have kept his mouth shut. Okay, so we had a DUI accident where a guy kept driving straight into the woods into a tree because his GPS was predicting a future street. He walked back to his hotel room and left his check-in papers in the car. So we go to the hotel and go to his room and knock on the door. He did not have to answer, but he did. He was pretty clearly drunk. I asked him if he had anything to drink since the accident. He did not have to answer, or he could have told us that he drank after the accident. He said, "No, I haven't had anything to drink since the accident." And, where I'm from, you have 24 hours to report a property damage-only accident. So, it wasn't even a hit and run. So as I'm locking the guy up, he tells me he's a lawyer. I told him, "I hope you're not a defense attorney." But in his defense, he was drunk. A cousin of a friend of mine travels around the state to take in deadbeat dads. Gets to one place, a 4-year-old kid is home, dad isn't. So the cop starts talking to the kid, making sure he's okay and such. After a bit of this, kid says to cop, "Want to see my dad's secret garden?" Takes him to a closet with a false back, opens it up to see a small pot farm. Guy gets home to a few cop cars and a few charges. Not a cop, but pretty applicable to the thread. When I was in high school, I liked to park in parking spots that cars had parked poorly next to just as a FU. One time, I was at a high school football game, and a Jeep had parked like shit. He was nearly halfway into the spot, next to him, and parked at an angle. I was driving a '98 Chevy Silverado, big old pickup truck, at the time, and I had my brother to help guide me into the spot, so I was perfectly in the lines. That made it so the driver door was completely impossible to get in. I took a picture for the novelty of it and went on my way. When I got back to my car, the Jeep was gone, and every panel on the passenger side of my car was keyed. There was an officer nearby, so I told him about it and showed him the picture. He told me there's not a lot they could do because there were no witnesses, but he'd give it a shot. He looked up their license plate, called them, and asked them if they'd done it. They confessed and ended up having to pay $1,600 in restitution, along with getting a felony. Not a cop either. Friend was pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt while he was with a few buddies. Gets handed his ticket. Guy in the back seat says, "Am I going to get a ticket too?" Officer replies, "Well, were you wearing your seatbelt?" No." "All right, can I see your ID?" Not the brightest fellow about. Fellow officer stopped a car for a turn violation. Guy is a wannabe drug dealer who we've seen around the bars before. We're talking with him and ask permission to search his car. He agrees. I'm bullshitting with him about sports and weather, and the officer finds a duffel bag. So I joke and say, "Nothing in there that's dangerous, right? Like bombs or grenades or explosives?" He nods and says, "Yeah, a bunch of dynamite." I'm waiting for him to laugh or smile or shrug or do something that screams it's a joke. Nothing. I say, "I'm going to open the bag and look, okay?" Expecting at any moment he will stop me. He doesn't. It was 8 sticks of dynamite he stole from a construction site. Separate story. If he didn't say anything, I would have ignored the bag thinking it was tools.
Some of these stories you just kick back in your head and just say, boy, what an idiot. But this one, for some reason, to me, I was like, boy, what an idiot.
The absolute best example of this has to be Dennis Rader, aka the BTK killer. For those of you unfamiliar with BTK, it stood for Bind, Torture, Kill, and he was a notorious serial killer spanning several decades from 1974 until 1991, and he's responsible for at least 10 murders. Anyway, BTK went silent for a long time, and nobody had heard anything up until 2004 when he started sending in letters to the police and media again. In 2005, he sends a letter to the police asking if he sends in a floppy disk, will they be able to trace it? They tell him no. So the doofus sends them a disk. They're able to recover metadata from a deleted Word document from the disk, which contained his name and the church where he was president of their council. They were easily able to find him after that, and he was arrested and eventually given 10 consecutive life sentences. He probably could have gotten away with all those murders if he would have just stayed silent. Some idiots from my hometown broke into a few houses in the early 2000s. Among several stolen items were handheld video cameras. They proceeded to record themselves breaking into several more houses and posing back home with their haul. Several of the items, including said camera, ended up at pawn shops. Well, when the battery died, they didn't remove the tape. As is customary, the pawn shop found a compatible charger and watched the recordings. Copies of their fingerprints, IDs, and the video were turned into the police, and these morons went to jail. Almost everything from the videos was recovered from area pawn shops. I'm a nice guy, and I enjoy a chat. You'd be surprised how much this lowers someone's guard. Stood in full uniform, people will just start telling you things that could get them in trouble. Multiple times I had to tell people to shut up. It was usually petty things like where they hid their weed stash, that they'd got a bifta in their pocket for later. Not really worth the time and effort to deal with how squeezed we were. One time, a guy really got himself in trouble by effectively telling me he had stolen property on him. I had to act on that one. Not a cop, but have a buddy that is. Nothing too crazy, but he's had countless moments where he's tried to give people a break, or all they had to do was sit down and be quiet, but they end up talking themselves into jail. Recently had a dude he pulled over that was a bit over the limit, but not too much, so he was going to let a friend pick him up instead of arresting him. Guy got to talking and basically revealed driving under the influence was something he did fairly regularly. A single mistake is one thing, but my buddy decided the best chance at getting him to stop would be learning this lesson the hard way. Its stupidity carried on for the next couple of months. He was supposed to go to court over the whole thing, but didn't show up. Police showed up at his job, cuffed him, and brought him to court. Judge told him he would have just received a slap on the wrist, but he now had to send him to jail for a couple of days. He was scheduled to report to jail a week or two later, and he didn't show up for that either. By this time, he disappeared. I never saw the guy again. Not a cop, but a witness. During college, my friends and I would hang out outside and smoke hookah. Frequently, we would invite strangers who passed by to join on campus. Police would casually chat with us as they made their rounds. So one time, a group of freshmen walked past and asked to join. After about 15 minutes, the campus police car rolls up, and the freshmen get visibly nervous. We tell them to calm down, the cops are chill. As soon as the cops get out of the car, one freshman bolts and makes it about 20 feet before the cop tackles him. We all clap and heckle the kid. Upon searching him, the cops find a bunch of weed. Then he says, "You realize, prior to running, I had no reason to be suspicious. I just wanted to talk to my friends over there," and points at us. The cop ends up writing a ticket and sends him off. This situation came from a friend of mine. So he lived with 3 other guys in a 4-bedroom apartment. One day, when only one roommate was home, the police came knocking. They asked if they could come in and search for suspected drug use. Here's where I should mention, the roommate who was home was kind of an oblivious shut-in who spent most of his day playing World of Warcraft or Magic the Gathering in his room. So of course he says, "Sure, come on in," having no idea what his roommates have been up to. In room 1, they find nothing, as that was the oblivious guy's room. Room 2, they find a personal amount bag of weed. Room 3, they find a pipe. Roommate 3 didn't smoke, but he had an RM2, played video game a lot, so it belonged to RM2. In room 4, they find a possession with intent to distribute giant bag of weed, apparently just a shitload. RM2 told me it was the most weed he'd ever seen in one place, and he was pissed because he always bought from someone else, didn't know his roommate was a dealer. 3 of the 4 get arrested. Only one who didn't was the guy who let them in. My friend was roommate 3. Charges against him got dropped because RM2 fessed up to the pipe being his and got a slap on the wrist. Not sure what happened to roommate 4. They never saw him again. This is going to be buried, but it's funny, so here. I was a cop in the Air Force Base in Alaska. 3 guys robbed our Class 6 store, liquor, and we responded to the store but got caught in traffic at a light on the way. So we were sitting there with lights and sirens on, trying to get people to move out of the way, when the back door to the car ahead of us opens and a guy gets out and goes spread eagle against his trunk. Confused, we get out to see what was up and realize that these were the robbers.
I'm not sure if that was just right place, right time for you, or born to lose for them, but either way, they're off the streets for a minute.
I'm a police officer in the UK. It was about 2 a.m., which meant streetlights were off. As I was patrolling, I saw a vehicle drive with only his side lights on. Spun around, pulled him over. I asked for his license, and it's provisional. His co-pilot was 20 and didn't have a license, and the vehicle didn't have L plates. This means he's driving otherwise than accordance of his license, and also driving with no insurance, because as if he had had any insurance, driving otherwise than in accordance normally invalidates it. So, I got him in the back of my car to speak to him, start writing out a traffic ticket for no insurance, and was going to seize the car and let him off for driving otherwise in accordance. However, as I'm writing the ticket, he says to me, "I shouldn't even be driving this car. My mate doesn't even know I took it." I just kind of pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "Yeah, my mate lives just up the road, and I was round his. He fell asleep, so I thought I'd just take the car and go for a ride." Right. I get another unit to go to the address, and the suspect's friends confirm he's not happy for him to be having the car, especially now that it's being seized. So now, instead of 6 points and a 200-pound fine and a pissed-off friend, he gets nicked for twalk, taking a vehicle without owner's consent, driving otherwise than in accordance of his license, and for no insurance. He's been to court and received 6 points and just shy of 1,000 pounds in fines and costs, as well as a pissed-off mate, and has spent a night in a cell.